Up until now, we've been talking about the hardware instrumentation that's required to make physiological measurements. We've been displaying those measurements on an oscilloscope screen. In the following lectures, we're going to go on to talk about digital signal processing. The principle will be that we will record the signals onto a computer, and that will allow us to perform some of the further processing in software rather than using the hardware that we've seen up until now. Some of that processing will be very similar to what you've seen before, particularly the filters, which you'll get a different perspective on, but some of it will be processing that simply wouldn't be possible using the electronic instrumentation that we've been using up to date. The signals as they exist in the instrumentation are voltages, and you'll remember from the previous lecture that if the signal is pressure, for example, or a temperature, then the first stage will be to convert it into a voltage so that we can measure it. The problem we face before we even talk about digital signal processing is converting that voltage into a form that the computer can understand. That's the role of a piece of electronics called an analog to digital converter. This is a sound card, and it contains an analog to digital converter specifically to convert the voltage signal that comes from, for example, a microphone or a musical instrument into a digital measurement that the computer can work with. And so the issues with working with this instrument are exactly the same as the ones that we'll face working with our physiological measurements. So I'm going to use this sound card as an example for the rest of our discussions. Now that we have our means for converting the voltages into a number suitable for processing on the computer, the problem is one that we would describe as sampling. So sampling is the same thing that you would need to do if I was to ask you to go and take some clinical observations of a patient and type them into a spreadsheet. There would be a couple of questions that you would have to answer before you could do that. First of all, how often would you need to make the measurement? And second, how accurately would you need to make the measurement? So let's consider the second one of those first, because in many respects it's the easier one to talk about.